In the middle of the mountains, now we are in a little town called Anopoli with Dias Kaloyanis, a local hero. Now about him I'm going to tell you later, in a place where he actually kind of lost his revolution, but here he was born and here he started 1770, the first Cretan uprising against the Turks. So about him later, but here I would like to tell you a bit more about the Sfakiotes and their culture. With that little church in the background, the creation myth. So supposedly when God created Crete, he started giving all the beautiful things to people living in the lowlands. So here olives, there wine, and so on and so forth. So in the end, Sfakiots are left with one thing, mountains and rocks. So of course, angry, armed to the teeth, they went straight to God. And God said, why do you think I gave all those things to people in the lowlands? So that then you can go and claim it. I guess that's already saying something about the local war culture. As you can see, God indeed left plenty of stone here. And that's, I think, something which unites plenty of mountain cultures, because the environment is rather unforgiving. Of course, you may have and graze your sheep and everything, but it's much easier to grab a weapon, go down to the lowlands and just take whatever you find. Or you can go and take things from your neighbor. So this culture, like many other mountain cultures, is known for two things. For being warlike and for personal vendettas. Now the thing is, already in the Venetian times, the Cretans were very rebellious, and many of the rebellions were either started or taken over by the Sfakiots. Well, they were always involved. So they do have a tradition of being rebellious, but also because you can steal a sheep or two from your own neighbor. This place is famous for blood fiats, for vendettas. And it works like this. Member of one family kills a member of a second family. So the second family has the right, or even obligation, you may say, to kill a member of the first family. The problem is with such justice, then the first family wants to kill a person from the other, and then the other a person from the first. And you don't kill the person responsible, you just kill anybody from the family. So you've got a situation where those vendettas would go on for 20, 30, 50, I even found information at more than 100 years. And sometimes whole villages were emptied because basically all the men were killed. And obviously that's one thing. Second thing is, sometimes people would just flee. They wanted to live, and vendettas wouldn't let them live a normal life. So what we have around you is the empty part, the abandoned part of Anopoli. How it came to be, I have no idea. But most probably that's not the issue of the vendettas. That's the issue of their rebelliousness. The gentleman we saw at the beginning today, kind of a, I don't know, local Rob Roy or something. He was leader of the first, but not the only uprising against the Ottomans, around 150 years of uprisings. So of course there were reprisals. My guess is the abandoned part that we're seeing right now was abandoned in the 19th century after one of the battles against the Turks. I don't know, but that's my little guess.
Here's one last little view of Anopoli, and then the idea was to go to Frango Castello, a medieval Venetian castle, and we did go there. The problem is it was completely happily closed. So that's it, we kissed the door, so to speak, and the poor Venetian lion looking at us sadly. Well, I'm afraid that everything now is going to be from off, and pretty much what you're gonna get are photos and Well, and some views from the car. Fortunately, that's being Crete. Those views are awesome. So, to finish the story of Dias Kaloyanis, he was actually born as Ioannis Vlachos, which basically means John the Vlach. He was from a pretty wealthy local family, so he got very good education, for example, in mainland Greece. And that's pretty much the time when the Russian Empire started convincing the Greeks to start uprisings. And our John de Vlach was one of those people who decided to do something about it. When he came back to Crete, people started calling him a very well-educated person, Dias Kaloyanis, so that's literally John the Teacher. And he got around 1,000, a bit more, people, and he started an uprising. The idea was he starts it and then Russian Empire sends help. Well, that help never materialized. So very soon the uprising was over, and with 70 companions, Dias Kaloyanis surrendered, well, at the Venetian castle. That's why I wanted to tell you his story there. Now, his end was rather gruesome. He was taken to Candia, to today's Heraklion, and there supposedly he was skinned alive. His brother was supposedly also there watching it, and he went insane. How true that is, I have no idea whether it's a fact or a legend, a tradition. Still sounds gruesome. And Dias Kaloyanis also did become an icon. So, for example, today the airport at Chania is named after him. His uprising was the first, but definitely not the last. And that's pretty much what I believe, that when we saw the ruins at Anopoli, that's 19th century, because after the Dias Kaloyanis uprising, Turks for the first time actually got control of Sfakia. Of course, that doesn't mean that there were no fights, so I believe the ruins were from those times. But not only Sfakiots, also generally speaking, Cretans started revolts. So for example, we went to Theriso to talk about Venizelos. Well, there were many other uprisings there as well. And for example, during the Greek War of Independence, there was one. The leader, when he lost, he got crushed with a stone mill wheel. So that's rather gruesome, I'd say, and that's supposedly the original one. In the end, the vendetta culture and then all the uprisings created a very particular bellic culture in Crete. So when Second World War begins, the Germans actually have a lot of problems, not with soldiers, but with the local civil population. We are talking about pretty much everybody, men, women, old, young, children even, started fighting the German soldiers. And I mean here, well, pretty much everybody, and in a very gruesome fights, literally hand-to-hand combat, face-to-face, with anything those people could grab, stones, little knives, and even something called katsuna. It's basically a walking stick of the shepherds made of wood, but they started using even that as a tool for fighting, and it became not only symbolic, it's also one of the main souvenirs that you can buy in Crete to take home if you can do it through Ryanair. Now, the Germans weren't simply surprised with the ferocity of the fighting. The reprisals began. And of course, we're talking here about mass executions and such. But actually, sometimes if there was a village that was, for example, supporting the resistance, or there was somebody from the village who was involved in the fights, they would literally destroy the whole village and then put up official posters and plaques saying that this and that place was demolished because of the barbarisms they were committing against the Germans. And you can still find some of the originals in museums, and of course in the towns which got rebuilt after the war, you will have replicas of the plaques, so you can very often see them while traveling around the island. But even if there were places where the villages weren't destroyed, of course the executions were still there. Many crimes were committed by the Germans, and Crete is generally filled with Second World War monuments, and of course with all the gear that was left behind and all the small, rather freaky private war museums. Another very interesting issue is the question of the Orthodox Church. Now, ironically, when the Ottoman Empire took Crete in the 17th century, it got better for the Orthodox authorities because Venice did not recognize them. But within the Ottoman Empire, people were not grouped according to nationality, for example, but according to religion. And the religious leaders become leaders of communities. And then the modern Greek nationalism is born. It is automatically connected to the Orthodox Church, and the church authorities become national leaders as well. So, for example, in terms of Crete, when the 19th century revolutions begin, the Orthodox authorities are not simply there, they are leading them. And for example, there were plenty of medieval monasteries, which were important for many reasons, but also they become centers of revolutions. For example, because very often they were fortified, originally against pirates, but now it's helpful when it comes to the struggles. So they were refuges for civilians, but also they would hide, for example, people who were fighting. And when I say fighters, the monks were among the fighters, as they are Cretans. They had the same mentality, and not only fighting during the 19th century revolutions, but also even during the Second World War. They would literally grab arms into their hands and shelter the Allied soldiers, those who weren't lucky enough to get across the sea to Egypt, and those who were lucky enough not to get caught by the Germans. That's why we visited a place called Preveli. People basically think of it as a beautiful beach, but there's also one of the most important monasteries there, and the monument you're seeing now, it's from the vicinity. Now, the monastery itself, well, the weather was horrible and it was during the week, so there was nobody there, but it is, for Cretans till the very day, one of the most important religious and historical monasteries on the island. Now, this is most definitely not the last time we are going to talk about warrior monks and the such, but the last bit we went into the mountains to see Siloritis, the highest mountain of Crete. So here, with some more spectacular views soon to come, a couple of extra words about how the Cretan culture of war is still kind of visible. Some of it is rather negative. I've been reading that there's an issue with domestic violence, for example. And supposedly the mainland Greeks have a very clear picture of Cretans. It's a man with a long moustache, a black shirt, and a knife between his teeth. And actually, those knives you can buy now as little souvenirs. Now, a more visible detail, especially in Sfakia, they tend to, during weddings especially, shoot at signs, and you can seriously see that. Now, that's that for today. Let me give you a little trailer to what's coming in the next episode, another thing that Crete is very, very famous for.
My first Minoan ruins of Phaistos, right behind my back, are 4,000 years of history, my friends. Now, one thing are the ruins, another thing are the vistas. So there's a great view from here of the surrounding valley and the holy mountains. So the idea was to actually go around the place showing you some details, but if this is the first Minoan place I'm visiting, that's my private time. So sorry, I'm just gonna hang around there and that's it. We're obviously gonna visit more places, so maybe there's gonna be other spots with more details, but this is my private visiting time. So catch you later.